Hello, America. It's TV's Dave Galvin introducing the biggest little city in the world. This is a 16 millimeter color print promoting Reno, Nevada, biggest little city in the world. This was put out in the 1950s at some point. I don't know very much about this, but it was released in North America. It's 24 minutes long, which tells me it probably aired as a promotional film, probably syndicated throughout the United States at some. And as always, this particular episode is brought to you by timeforyourvacation.com. That's timeforyourvacation.com. When it's time for you to go to Reno, give a call to timeforyourvacation.com. Enjoy the film.
This is a city of glitter and glamour, a city of neon and bright lights, of spinning wheels and dancing feet. This is Reno, the biggest little city in the world. Yes, this is a city of elaborate floor shows and plush casinos, where the doors are open around the clock. And night and day, the little city sings with activity. Reno, Nevada, a fabulous town. Yet there is another side to Reno that in the glare of the bright lights is often overlooked. When Blessing and I arrived here for a few days' visit, we found that other side. With the glittering neon signs dulled by a flood of brilliant sunshine, we found a lovely town with a permanent population of over 40,000 people, where these people work and live as in any other little city in America. Living normal lives, raising normal children, and building beautiful homes, which are the center of a normal family life. On the outskirts of town, in lush green surroundings that are unsurpassed for beauty, stand the attractive old buildings of the University of Nevada, in a setting so perfect that many motion pictures are made on its campus. It was almost a century ago that this university first opened its doors, and today, its highly respected School of Mines is famous the country over. Gambling is by far not the only base for Reno's economy. With Nevada's liberal tax and corporate laws, more industries each year are moving into the Reno area. Reno was founded in 1868, named after General Jesse Lee Reno, a Union hero of the Civil War. For a few years before the town was officially founded, however, it was known as Fuller's Crossing, named for an early pioneer who kept an inn on the south side of the Truckee River, where now stands the Riverside Hotel. And across the river from the riverside is the beautiful Mapes Hotel, the tallest building in Nevada. Besides being a tourist city, Reno is also famed as a convention city, and every year countless conventions and trade shows are held in the over 100 hotels, motels, and guest ranches in the Reno area. Our first day in Reno, Blessing and I had an early lunch in the Mapes Sky Room. with a beautiful view of the city and river below, and the snow-capped Sierra Mountains for a background. And the highway winding into the distance at the foot of the mountains seemed to beckon us. So after lunch, we headed out of town for a drive to Carson City. Carson City, named for the famous scout Kit Carson, is the capital of Nevada, and it has the distinction of being the smallest state capital in the United States. Its population is just 5,000 people. The magnificent Capitol building stands on tree-shaded Carson Street, and Blessing and I walked through the Capitol grounds looking for the famous Carson City Mint, which at the end of the last century made silver coins from the ore mined at the fabulous Comstock lode in Virginia City. And you know, it was not until after he had left that we discovered the man whom we stopped to ask directions to the mint was actually Charles H. Russell, governor of the state of Nevada, and his easy friendliness was typical of everyone we met. The governor's directions were simple, and we easily found the famous old mint, which has now become a museum. An interesting replica of the famous Liberty Bell from Independence Hall in Philadelphia stands outside the building, while inside was a fabulous collection of relics from the early history of Nevada, as well as a complete replica of a silver mine which tourists can enter. One relic, a little bit too large to get inside the building, was the famous old Glenbrook locomotive, which had seen so much service in the days when the mines were running at full blast, hauling timber from the logging camps to the mines. As we drove back toward Reno through the beautifully fertile fields in the valley, we spotted a guest ranch sign which belonged to an old friend. And so we turned into the ranch in hopes that she might be there. There are many small guest ranches around Reno, one of the most popular types of accommodations for visitors. Each of them, in its own way, is comfortably attractive. And yet we suspected that this one had an added attraction because it belonged to Beatrice Kay. Our road on to town took us past the championship 18-hole golf course, for which Reno is well known in the sports world, and then we turned aside to the Washoe Horsemen's Club to watch the members practicing for their coming show. Riding is a favorite pastime in Reno, but these youngsters were taking it seriously as they practiced their drill maneuvers for the show. Rehearsal over, everyone heads out over the hills to a chuck wagon snack, a pleasure that whole families seem to enjoy. Including this little miss, whose tiny legs would hardly reach her stirrups. And a young lady who chose to drive her own carriage in style. Sightseeing over, we arrived back at our hotel in time for a dip in the beautiful riverside pool. I must confess, too, that we were startled a bit by a spectacular dive over our heads by the lifeguard as we walked along the terrace. Then, we spent a lazy hour on the terrace with the rest of the sun worshippers before dinner time, while we planned a trip for next day to Lake Tahoe, the lake of the sky. In wintertime, the snows fall heavily on the Sierras, and the Reno Ski Bowl has become one of the most famous in the country. A few minutes' drive brought us to the huge ski lift, which operates during summer months for sightseers, lifting you past incomparable scenery to an elevation of 10,000 feet in but a few minutes. In the high stillness of the mountains, we were climbing to the top of the world, it seemed. And at this elevation, snowdrifts still cling to the mountaintop. Then, when I had climbed the last few feet to the peak, I saw in the distance our destination, the lake of the sky, nestled against a backdrop of snow-capped mountains. Exquisite Lake Tahoe. The drive down the mountainside to the lake is breathtaking in its beauty, every turn of the road giving a view more startling than the last. Soon we were driving through Cave Rock, where we stopped for a rest. Lake Tahoe is known the world over for its crystal blue clarity, with an incredible color that comes from its great depth, more than 1,600 feet at its deepest point. And leaving the Plymouth at the road's edge, we walked to the edge of the cliff, and there the lake lay at our feet, glistening like a huge emerald set in a mountain wonderland. Then, back to our car, and a winding road by the water's edge soon brought us to Zephyr Cove, where the speedboats lured us. And Blessing and I set out for a ride around the lake to see sights you can see only from the water. Lake Tahoe's shores are dotted with resorts, and here and there a small farm or a ranch, all surrounded by a virgin forest of pine, through which occasionally a jagged rocky peak thrusts its top through the green of the trees. As we slowly drove through this natural beauty, it was hard to believe that this was a new forest, for most of the original timber growing here had been cut many years before to supply the demands of the mines at Virginia City. In fact, there is more timber underground in those mines than there is standing beside the lake today. Though the mines are now abandoned, lumbering is still an important industry around Reno. Great quantities of pine being shipped each year from the many sawmills in the area. The last day of our visit to Reno, we had saved for a trip through one of the most famous ghost towns of the West, Virginia City. This was the site of the first and the greatest silver mine in the world. In its heyday, this was a thriving city, with schools like the old Fourth Ward School, which is still standing. All but abandoned now, with a population of only a few hundred residents, it still is one of the major tourist attractions in all of the West. Beautiful St. Mary's in the mountains, which is still in use. A new building built in 1876 after the Great Fire in which almost 2,000 buildings were destroyed in Virginia City. And St. Paul's Episcopal Church. Yes, here was history. Not the crumbling antiquity of Europe or the Far East, but the lusty, roistering echo of America's growing pains of less than a century ago, when the discovery of silver and gold speeded the development of the West. This was a town which, in its day, was larger than Chicago at that same period. We were are told that these fabulous mines contain 600 miles of underground workings, tunneled beneath the town, that this tremendously wealthy deposit of gold and silver ore was discovered almost by accident, the silver being unrecognized and spurned by the men who found it while seeking gold, that before the mine was worked out, almost $1 billion in wealth had been taken from the ground. Yet today, the mines stand deserted. The old shafts boarded up, the piles of tailings or mill waste drifting with the wind. This was once the main office of the mine, and through this building passed the fabulous wealth of the Comstock. Yes, here was an echo of American history which we seemed to feel and hear as we moved through the streets of Virginia City, which pressed closer upon us as we entered the old Piper Opera House, where America's most famous performers appeared in the Bonanza days, and Mark Twain was a struggling young dramatic critic. Perhaps the old posters inspired the desire, but Blessing and I decided on dinner and a show for that evening as a climax to our visit to fabulous Reno, the playground center of the modern West, the biggest little city in the world.